Welcome back to Real Estate Mindset. Today's video is going to be on what impacts missing gold from Fort Knox would have on the U.S. economy and the global economy. And then we're going to ask the question, should we drop everything we're doing right now and should we put all of our money, I'm talking all of our money, in gold right now, because is that bad boy about to skyrocket? When we look at the 5-year chart of gold, you guys can see at the beginning of 2020, gold was in the 1500s. So right now it's jumped all the way up in 5 years to almost $3,000. Needless to say, gold has basically doubled in 5 years. Now, Mitch Vexler, before I really jump in here and we start tackling Fort Knox and gold, how are you today, sir?
Good. It's a very interesting topic. I've been following this for a long time for a variety of reasons, but we'll get into it here shortly.
Yeah, absolutely. We got some great questions, guys. And don't forget to like this video, comment on the video, and share the video. Now, I'm going to put up some overlays as I'm talking because I want you guys to remember how precious and rare gold really is. The discovery of missing gold at Fort Knox would lead to profound consequences across various dimensions, including global markets, the U.S. financial system, geopolitical relations, and public trust in government institutions, sending gold and potentially crypto absolutely skyrocketing. Now, if, and this is a big if, you guys, if Fort Knox's gold reserves were either found missing or diminished, it would likely trigger an immediate collapse of the US dollar and financial system stability. Gold reserves act as a financial safety net, reinforcing public confidence in the dollar and providing a hedge against inflation. Without that assurance, trust in the currency would erode, leading to a significant devaluation of the US dollar and potentially lead to hyperinflation. Now, such a revelation could result in skyrocketing gold prices due to scarcity fears, with estimates suggesting that gold could surge to $5,000, even up to $7,500 per ounce, essentially, you guys, overnight. Now, in extreme scenarios, if trust in fiat currency completely collapses, prices could exceed $10,000 per ounce. Inflationary pressures would devastate businesses and households while reshaping fiscal policies as we know it. So, Mitch Vexler, given the amount of inflation, could gold double from where it's at right now? Can we get to $6,000 per ounce in gold?
We have to understand what gold is in order to answer that question. Gold is money. The paper that you hold in your hand is an IOU. It's a credit. It is not money. It's symbolic of the credit. Gold is money. Crypto is not yet proven because it's brand new, relatively speaking, on thousands of years of proof of gold being money. If it turns out that the gold isn't in Fort Knox, that's one scenario. However, understanding that gold is money means that money better be there, right? It's the backing. And that would mean that abject fraud has continued throughout the entire system since the gold standard was removed by President Nixon. And that is one of the elements that we've been saying with regard to the real estate tax. These things are all connected. It's a fraud. And you have certain ETFs, and I'm not going to mention them, but there are ETFs, exchange traded funds, that are supposed to be backed by the precious metals. Well, if it turns out that the metals aren't in Fort Knox, then the ultimate definition of what you have, again, is paper chasing paper. The real math behind it, because I've run the math, says that gold will go between $48,000 and $80,000 an ounce, not having anything to do with the issue of whether it's in Fort Knox or not, but having to do with the issue of the money supply, be it M0, M1, and M2. And that comes back to what happens. And there is evidence for this. In other words, if you're going to exchange a currency for real gold, what is the gold worth? Well, that number is somewhere around 48 to 80,000. Nobody knows exactly because it depends what they're going to peg it to. So the ramifications of that would be absolutely massive. And one of the reasons why the government should have been telling the truth as to what's inside of Fort Knox from day one.
Last time that Fort Knox was actually physically audited, and it probably wasn't even audited technically, was in the 70s. But Mitch, my next question is this. I mean, that was much higher, actually. I was just hoping for $6,000 an ounce. 40,000 is crazy.
48 to 80. Yeah.
I mean, and let's be realistic, okay? And this is a sincere, legitimate question. Should I put all, and I'm talking all, like every penny of my money in gold or silver right now?
No, that's like people saying 4 years ago, should I put all my money in Bitcoin? And the answer is no, right? Because there's no proof that these things are going to happen. So you want to diversify out. And that's one of the reasons why I said, 3% of your assets, 5% of your assets. Okay, fine. That's the right way to think about it. And could somebody who's got a lot of money, and this has happened. I happen to know somebody that put $50 million into silver. So it can happen, but they're extremely wealthy, right? So to them, it doesn't represent like 2% of their assets. So again, if you follow the math, 3%, 5%, okay, fine, no problem. But to go crazy on it because you don't know what's going to happen and you don't know where it's going to get pegged.
Right.
Something is going to happen, that's clear. Inflation is running, that's clear. There are problems due to the fraud, that's clear. There's problems due to the unfunded liabilities, clear. Problems due to the U.S. national debt, clear. And this is one of the reasons why I've been pounding the table and doing these workouts to get this debt down. Doge is doing what they're doing, which is great, fantastic, but it's a spit in the ocean on what's necessary. You've got to go after the debt. You've got to go after the fraud heavy. And until that happens, gold and silver are in play. And if inflation keeps running, even copper is going to be in play, although you would need a semi-load of copper to make any sense. But, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, certainly missing gold from Fort Knox would cause a bit of, devaluation in the dollar.
Shockwave, yeah.
I mean, shockwave, gold prices would skyrocket. I mean, but the, risk versus reward, do I really want to put my money on there?
There would be a lot of bankruptcies. Those ETFs that claim to have the holdings of physical, and if they only have the paper in exchange for those holdings, they're all gone. They would be wiped off the face of the earth in a matter of nanoseconds. And obviously they'd be sued for fraud, et cetera, et cetera. But this is a huge problem because that would represent that paper is chasing paper.
Well, I mean, then it's going to be a really smart idea for them to audit Fort Knox, because if there is missing gold, the sooner that we know about it, the better, especially considering we're in a highly leveraged debt society. But what I want to do, Mitch, is I want you to hear, and I want the viewers to hear what President Trump is saying as far as what does he want to do? Does he really want us to audit Fort Knox? And then I want to show you a letter from a senator on what he's saying needs to be done in regards to Fort Knox. And then we'll talk about some geopolitical impacts that could happen as a result of missing gold. Let's listen to Trump.
They're also going to Fort Knox. I'm going to go with Elon. And would anybody like to join us? Because we want to see if the gold is still there. We want to see. Wouldn't that be terrible? We open up this Fort Knox. It's just solid granite that's 5 feet thick. The front door, you need 6 musclemen to open it up. I don't even think they have windows. Wouldn't that be terrible if we opened it up and there was no gold there? So we're going to open those doors. We're going to take a look. And if there's 27 tons of gold, we'll be very happy. I don't know how the hell we're going to measure it, but that's okay. We want to see lots of nice, beautiful, shiny gold in Fort Knox. Don't be totally surprised. We open the door, we'll say, there's nothing here. They stole this too.
Here's the letter right here from Mr. Paul, the Senate, dated February 19th. Congratulations on your confirmation as Secretary of Treasury, as we discussed during your confirmation. I appreciate your commitment to transparency throughout the department. Today, I write specifically about the United States Mint and the United States Bullion Depository at Fort Knox, Kentucky. According to the department, Fort Knox holds 147.3 million ounces of gold. Despite holding over half of the U.S. gold reserves, Fort Knox has not been subject to a formal audit since 1974. Prior to a visit by Treasury Secretary and others in 2019, 42 years have eclipsed since a civilian was allowed to enter and view the gold vault. Mitch, let's talk about geopolitical and international market effects if, and again, I know this is a huge if there was gold found to be missing in Fort Knox. The global consequences would be equally disruptive. Missing gold would undermine the credibility of the U.S. in international trade and finance, spurring a loss of confidence among foreign governments. Now, this could accelerate trends like de-dollarization as nations shift the reserves to other currencies. Ever hear of BRICS? Or alternative assets like Bitcoin. International gold markets would experience extreme volatility with central banks and investors rushing to acquire gold as a safe haven asset, which is exactly what we're seeing right now. Now, this may lead to a significant geopolitical shift, including strategic realignment in global trade balances and potential calls for a new monetary summit to stabilize economies or possibly a new universal currency. Mitch, again, I know this is an if, but if there is gold missing from Fort Knox, do you think if all the gold is missing, that could be a segue into a new, potentially universal currency? Or am I looking too much into this, sir?
No, because the U.S. government would never let a universal central currency occur. It's a stupid idea because it destroys cultures. It's no better than what happened with the creation of the European Union. It destroyed the culture because everything got subbed out. And it still leaves what the old thought is of the central bankers in charge. And what we've clearly seen is that the central bankers, under no circumstance whatsoever, can be trusted. That game is over. Look at what the IMF is doing. Look at what's happening with the European Union. The reality is, look at how close to a virtual disaster the United States just missed. We got away by the skin of our teeth on this last election. This is a big deal. And if that gold isn't there, it's just more ramifications of the fraud. It's kind of like that movie Ocean's 13, where they open up the vault after they stole the gold, and there's this little itty bitty fox sitting on the shelf. Well, I don't think that that's happened, but I wouldn't just want to look at that gold. I'd want to pull some of those bars and drill through them and find out what's in the middle of them. So, because it's been years. See, Rand Paul's father also said, I want to investigate this. Okay, that was 20 years ago, and they still haven't done it. Well, the question is why? What are you hiding? Everything we're looking at smacks of this fraud. And what you just said, the statement you said about the global shift, the problem is global shift of fear. If that's not there, the U.S. has been lying globally. So think of the ramifications. Think of all the leverage that has occurred under the theory that gold is there. And if it's not, well, we know that China's been buying. We know that Russia's been buying. They even have their own mines, and they're not letting the gold out of their own country. So there's a reason why these things are happening. If it turns out that the U.S. government says, okay, well, this is how we're going to recast the debt and we're going to use gold, that 48,000 is a very realistic number. I've run the math.
Wow.
It doesn't mean it's going to happen.
Right.
It's just that you've got to, if you want to monetize your debt and fix it and tie it to something, you're not going to tie it to Bitcoin. You're going to tie it to gold. Bitcoin may play a future in it. The math of Bitcoin, math of Ethereum, I've looked at it. It's good. The math is great. What it also leads to is if you know how to use the math, it gets rid of the banks, which is really what should happen. A lot of these bad banks that are out there should go away. And that debt load at those banks, if you think about it, it's tied to real estate. People that have gold and they're using the gold as leverage, well, that's a whole other problem. Do you really have the gold or did you borrow it on paper? The fraud would just be absolutely rampant. So the shock wave would be absolutely massive. And who's at fault? Well, if it turns out that gold is missing, the answer is the U.S. government. You committed a fraud.
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me, Mitch. I mean, look at all the fraud we've been seeing. Now, I mean, obviously things are at record highs right now. Home prices, land prices, gold prices. But what do you think, based on your experience as of right now, what's the better investment? Buying gold or buying land? A lot of people still buying land out there, even though the prices are outrageous, but land never goes away, right? So what do you think is the better investment given the inflation right now, land or gold?
Real estate at all-time highs due to fraud created at the central appraisal districts, the taxing entities. Land at all-time highs due to the overvaluation and overtaxation created by the taxing entities in the central appraisal districts. Fraud. What's gold doing? All-time high. Why? Fear. These two things are generating fear. When you've got inflation as the third element created by the Federal Reserve. 1, 2, and 3, all fraudulent. What's gold doing? It's responding in direct correlation to fear. These three things are fraud. Where else can you put your money that isn't a fraud? And then the direct answer to your question on land versus gold, it depends whose hands it's in. If land is in my hands, I know what to do with it, clearly. So I have the ability to generate money from that land in most circumstances. If mom and pop says, well, I'm going to go and invest in farmland and you don't know what you're doing, you're crazy. Now, I wouldn't tell you not to do it. Do whatever you want. But the point of the matter is land is only worth what you can do with it. And if you don't know what to do with it or how to do it, you're gambling. It's that simple. So at that point, would you rather not gamble and say, okay, fine, whatever happens with gold or silver in terms of the pricing, at least I have it. At least that's my money. Gold and silver, precious metals, copper to a certain extent, are money, right? And that's true money, real money. Well, if you've got that and you're not part of the banking system with regard to what's in your hands or buried in your backyard somewhere, that's your money. That's your security. So now you have to ask, okay, if gold is, which it does on average, it runs about 8% a year and it's done it for years. Okay, that's 8% compounding principle of your value, but it's in your hands. So would you rather own farmland, super high prices, where the actual product produced on that farm can't generate enough to pay for the land? Because that's what's happening in this marketplace. In other words, you got pure downside. You go out and buy farmland at $15,000 an acre, even though Bill Gates is doing it, he's doing it to bury money, right? He's doing it for a different reason. Mom and pop, if you want to get a rate of return on your money, that farm has to be able to produce. And that farmland is probably only worth $4,000 an acre if you're running cows. We've looked at this. And we've had people that are suffering from the real estate taxes. One lady has 1,000 head of cow. Her land got dinged by the taxing authority at $80,000 an acre, not worth $4,000 an acre. So the point of the matter is you have to understand, what am I doing with this land? Am I putting my money into something that can't generate any money? Or am I better off just saying, you know something? It's mine. I'll put it in the backyard. I'll bury it somewhere. I'll stick it in a vault somewhere, whatever it is, but it's mine. I've got value for my money, and not take the economic risk of gambling on something you know nothing about.
Honestly, I may go buy some gold as soon as we're done with this video. But before I go buy some gold, Mitch, let's see what Musk had to say about auditing Fort Knox.
Yeah. It's Kentucky. It's a military base. It's a ton of gold, tons and tons and tons
like
of gold.
5,000 tons of gold or
5,000
give or
tons
take,
of gold
you know?
are there in the ground in like this. I mean, it's a very secure
I think
thing.
we all want to see it. You know?
I'd love to see it.
Like, this is your gold, by the way. It's the public's gold.
Do you think it's not there?
I don't know. But I think
You just want to see it.
Yeah, we want to go see it and just make sure, like, somebody did spray paint some lead or something, you know?
Yeah.
Like, is this real gold? Buy at the bar, you know?
Didn't then.
But I think, honestly, you know, part of this also is just like, let's have some fun and like I said, all this gold in Fort Knox, it's the public's gold. It's your gold. So, like, I think you have like a right to see it.
You want to take a tour?
You know.
Well, if I have a right to see it, then I'd like to see it. But I want to talk about the fact that there would be, again, if there's missing gold, political and legal ramifications if the gold was missing from Fort Knox. Domestically, it would be regarded as one of the country's largest financial scandals, leading to widespread investigations into government mismanagement and or potential theft. Missing gold could erode public trust in the U.S. Treasury and the Federal Reserve, for people that still trust the Federal Reserve for some reason, and other government institutions, with accusations of corruption and cover-ups dominating all political landscapes. Now, Congress could see intensifying calls for reforms, including stricter monetary transparency laws and a comprehensive audit of both Fort Knox and other gold reserves. They have gold that's not just in Fort Knox. Now, legal consequences might include severe criminal charges for any individuals found culpable, along with international scrutiny and lawsuits. So in other words, it's going to be a huge issue, a huge issue. Mitch, here's the question I have for you. In your opinion, is there gold missing from Fort Knox? What do you think?
Nobody knows, but what I would say is that random searches based on weight, temperature, and drilling are going to be necessary. It's just not enough to go and look and say, okay, I can count the bars and add the tons. And that can be done. You can literally take a 3D scan and figure out what it is, but that's not good enough. You've got to do a random sample. And that's what needs to be done in order to satisfy and answer the question, what's really gone on here? And if nothing has gone on, then why have no audits been done? In other words, again, what are you hiding? And it comes back to the statement that I made, which is the only thing that's holding this entire mess together is the fraud. Well, it's got to get fixed, because the result of the fraud is the cumulative compounding of fraud, because it's all connected to interest rates. It's principal and interest. And if it's cumulatively compounding, it's not based on anything, then it's all hot air. That's fraud. A lot of people will need to go to jail over that. And that isn't going to get the job done. You got to claw that money back and figure out where it really went. So they better answer the question, because the US government's credibility, if that isn't there, we got a big problem.
Yeah, definitely. Now, here's the thing. Even if the gold's not there, the U.S. government can just shuffle gold around from other institutions and put it in Fort Knox to make it appear like there's gold there still. Take a listen to this video, Mitch, from Mr. Maloney.
Is the Fed's rarely discussed auxiliary vault, and suggests that the auxiliary vault of the Fed is probably located in the neighboring Chase Manhattan Plaza facility, now run by J.P. Morgan. And if there is, as has been suggested, we know that J.P. Morgan vaults are 5 floors below ground, right across the street from the Federal Reserve vaults, which are 5 floors below ground. Now, there is a reason for that coincidence. That's where the bedrock starts. And so you go all the way down until you hit bedrock, and both of these vaults are going to be roughly at the same level. But since there's an auxiliary vault that's not part of the main vault underneath the Fed, could there be that tunnel? If there is, that has to be, the military needs to take charge of that tunnel and make sure nothing comes through.
To his point, JP Morgan plans $4 billion U.S. gold delivery amid tariff fears. So it's just a tariff fears. It has nothing to do with the Federal Reserve. It has nothing to do with Fort Knox. But it is interesting that he mentioned JP Morgan and their safe. And now this article has mentioned that JP Morgan plans to receive $4 billion in U.S. gold. So, Mitch, whether they're going to do it or not, do you think that it's possible that they could just shuffle around gold to make it seem as though there's still enough gold in Fort Knox? Do you think it's possible that they can do that type of manipulating?
Well, that happens around the globe right now. Like the LBMA, which is the London Bullion Market, which is the exchange and the holder of gold in London. That's what they do, right? Gold moves between countries constantly. The problem is that the LBMA, the rumor is, it's published, it's public, that they don't have enough reserves in their holdings to satisfy who owns that gold, right? So it's not that the LBMA owns the gold, it's that they're holding the gold. And that brings you right back to the paper derivatives, those IOUs, as in what you have in the ETFs. So if those ETFs have a certain amount of gold being held by London, but London doesn't physically have it, okay, where is it, right? In other words, the paper chasing paper, that's the disaster. That's the fraud. If you don't hold it in your possession, what's wrong with holding it in your possession, right? If you're the government, you got 27 tons of it, fine. You got 27 tons, set it to market value. That says 27 tons times $2,964 an ounce. There's your value. Now, nothing wrong with saying we're going to revalue it based on the debt. There will be a credibility issue because that signifies in reality a default, but it won't default because the gold will be there. The other countries would have to play ball. point of the matter is there better be enough of that supply going around, or the credibility of the US government is on the hook. The ETFs will get wiped off the face of the earth literally in nanoseconds because it'll be over. Their CEOs and everybody else who are taking money from the public based on paper chasing paper, they're going to end up in jail. This is going to be a big problem.
Mitch, my conclusion is if there is gold indeed missing from Fort Knox, the ramifications would extend across multiple financial and political platforms. And not only that, security domains. It would plunge financial markets into absolute chaos, probably destabilize international relationships, and initiate significant reforms in the government and monetary systems, kind of like, again, what it seems as though is happening right now. So I keep going back like, man, when all is said and done, Mitch, looking at all of this, reading all of this, understanding how gold works, the leverage, all of that, I'm going to go buy some gold. All right. But I want to give you the last words on this video. Go ahead and take us out of here, man. How do we want to close this one out?
It's fun to theorize what could happen. And there are traders who do that, and they make a very good living taking unilateral bets. This is something you don't want to take a unilateral bet with. There's a high probability that no matter what, due to the inflation, what's happening, that gold will continue to go up. But its average pace is 8% a year, and that's perfectly fine. That's what it's done for years. The idea that somebody's betting on the future where we're about to have a disaster, you don't know what the government's going to do to offset it. Mathematically speaking, as I said, my math shows between 48,000 and 80,000 if that disaster occurs. But if it doesn't, and it just plugs along at 8% a year, no harm, no foul, don't take your eye off the ball, because your better rate of return is getting rid of your own debt and not participating in a system that's loaded with fraud.
Well said. Yep. Like your mortgage, for one thing, like pay down your mortgage even faster instead of go buy some gold, because you'll save a lot more money that way. Well said, man. You know, and I love how you tell people if they're going to invest in themselves or they want to invest in something, invest in paying their mortgage off. Well said, because a mortgage, you guys, is horrible debt. A mortgage stands for a death contract. Other than that, guys, let us know how we did on this gold report. Let us know whether or not you agree with us. Share the video, like the video, comment on the video. And if you guys are out there investing in gold or silver, you guys already know we wish you luck and we hope you win.